What happens when a rusty mailbox becomes the spark to ignite an absurd rebellion against a tyrannical HOA? Join me as I uncover the hilarious chaos of embracing defiance and community. Before we begin today's deranged HOA story, tell me you haven't had your fill of irrational and power-grabbing HOA nonsense. Smash that like button to show you're on my side, and drop a comment if you've ever faced off against an overbearing homeowners association. Be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell, because this saga's only getting crazier from here. As the chaos of indie suburban expression exploded around us, Karen's face morphed into an expression I could only describe as violent disbelief. With her rigid posture, she resembled a blender on the verge of disaster, dangerously full, and just waiting for someone to flip the switch. I could practically hear the whirring of her inadequate coping mechanisms as she scanned our mailboxes decked out in psychedelic hues, her lip quivering like a poorly constructed piñata about to burst open. "This is unacceptable," she shouted, her voice sharp enough to slice through the jubilant cries of freedom echoing throughout our artistic arena. "You will regret this day, Jordan Blake. There will be consequences." The very way she said my name made me feel more powerful than a king donning a golden crown atop a glittering throne. Cute, right? But really, there was a thrill in calling her out, watching her scrunch her face like a toddler denied candy while the entire community reveled in our newfound extravagance. "Consequences," I replied, perhaps a little too dramatically, channeling my inner Shakespearean actor. "Perhaps you're confused, dear leader of the HOA. This isn't the Dark Ages. In fact, I might loosely call this the dawn of a fiendishly spectacular renaissance." My voice boomed through the crowd like a thunderstorm announcing itself just to create chaos. The gleeful laughter that erupted around me sounded like a symphony composed of notes we had been yearning to play, sight and sound uniting in a dance of defiance. As I shifted my gaze toward the row of mailboxes suddenly transformed into a kaleidoscope of colors, the sight of Liam smashing neon pink paint onto his own box felt victorious, an artistic rebellion that was simply intoxicating. Who knew reclaiming our right to be colorful could feel so exhilarating? Shivers of excitement were running through me, like I had just downed a gallon of double espresso. Then came my moment of genius. Or insanity, depending on how you looked at it. Well, if consequences are coming, I hereby declare this a non-profit art collective, the Rusty Mailbox Society. I proclaim dramatically, gesturing enthusiastically at our true masterpieces, now glittering under the midday sun as though they were the treasures of an underground gallery. Membership is free as long as you agree to express your most artistic interpretations of mailbox rust and rebellion. Cheers erupted from the crowd as hands shot up in solidarity, an army fresh for a glorious mission. I glanced at Liam, who caught my eye, bouncing with youthful vigor as if to shout, "This is it!" Had I just inadvertently started a creative revolution? Just as I began to bask in my newfound capacity for chaotic leadership, I spotted Karen again. Her atmosphere was a curdled blend of rage and sheer astonishment. Perhaps she was contemplating how she had lost control to a rogue group of aspiring artists armed with paint and passion, realizing, just maybe, her meticulously structured world had suddenly shattered into a million colorful pieces, not unlike the state of her personality. With conviction, she announced, "This is a ploy. You think you can undermine the very foundation of this community's bylaws with colorful nonsense? You will not win, Jordan." Oh, how juicy that was! Gloating and deceivingly calm retorts was her playbook. But she didn't know I had just begun. As if charmed by my elucidation of nonprofit cult, the crowd joined me in a chant. Long live the Rusty Mailbox Society. Ideas over oppression. The unity of our absurd collective became an unyielding force against her tyranny, bouncing across the street like we were hip-hop colliding with interpretive dance. Laughter was contagious, and the joy unleashed among the residents had an uncanny resemblance to a wild, bouncy castle, not too far from my own mind bubbling over with joy. What would your husband think of you now, staring in absolute horror at your neighbor's freedom of expression? It was scream-laugh-inducing thrilling mischief. Karen's face twisted with frustration, her hands clenching into unyielding fists that desperately wanted a reprieve. "You will face the HOA board's wrath, Jordan," she shrieked, unraveling her iconic bob around her neck, which seemed more fragile than before. "You cannot plan an art revolution without consequences." The more she sounded like a dressing room diva listening to too much color clashing, the more the crowd relished in our lush madness, exchanging exaggerated glances like a cue to keep escalating the absurdity. "Bring it on!" I hollered back, flinging my arms wide open as if I was welcoming an army of regional finds with confetti cannons, no less. I would have the last laugh. I could almost taste it, flavored delightfully with just a hint of sweet irony. But then, the grand finale erupted beyond my wildest imagination. Word of our rusty mailbox society was quickly circulating through the neighborhood like our own ludicrous meme. Yes, it was true. Everyone from parents to toddlers to nosy pets were getting in on this whimsical act of rebellion. Oh, to think how I had inadvertently forced the HOA into an accidental social media frenzy. They quickly became a punching bag for every disgruntled resident wanting to pipe up about the nonsense rules they had endured. Even the local newspaper caught wind. I could envision the article now. Suburb dares to color outside the lines. Perhaps we would finally secure our spot in the chronicles of suburban folklore. Could this absurd escapade turn into the community's heartbeat, the vivacious art of rebellion taking shape in the once dusty recesses of entitled negation? And so, as laughter bounced like pebbles across a lake of camaraderie, we began to set up painters' easels around the neighborhood, glistening under a vibrant sun. If we were going to pull off an artistic takeover, we might as well invite Karen into the experience. In a strange twist of fate, she was now invited to share the stage, her disillusion written in the deep contours of her frustrated expression. But could she ever find herself joining in with the Rust Rebels, our community's whims, our bursting canvases of absurdity? Did she have the spirit of freedom hiding beneath that tailored blazer? It was only time that would tell. Would she learn to embrace the chaos, or would she spiral into her own colors of despair? Only the next chapter would unveil the outcome of this dramatic collision of creativity and consequences. The smell of fresh paint wafted through the neighborhood, mingling with the bubbling excitement that could only be described as pure, unadulterated anarchy. I stood before a vibrant canvas, with more colors than an actual rainbow behind me, my trusty sidekick Liam right beside me, wielding a paintbrush like a sword of rebellion. The Rusty Mailbox Society had transformed from a ridiculous whim into a full-blown artistic uprising. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, each new stroke of paint on a mailbox felt like a tiny revolution against Karen's iron grip of oppression. I won't be surprised if the mailman starts delivering art supplies instead of mail soon. Liam laughed, his tattoos glistening with streaks of neon paint. How clever of me to invite art into our world of rust and trouble, I thought. But amid the colors and cheers, there lingered a thicker tension in the air, buzzing with anticipation like a poorly wired generator. Ah, yes, that was the infamous Karen, our neighborhood's self-proclaimed guardian of decorum, looming on the sidewalk, arms crossed so tightly I wondered if she was trying to perform a makeshift bear hug of disapproval. Her eyes darted around in disbelief, and for a fleeting moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of pity for her, like watching a sitcom villain suddenly realize they had stepped into a slapstick comedy. "What will it take for you people to come to your senses? This is a neighborhood, not a circus," she screeched, thin lips quivering against the backdrop of swirling paint and laughter. The crowd, emboldened by the absurdity, rallied around me, ready to defend our newfound colorful haven against her monochromatic fury. In a moment that can only be described as poetic theater, I strutted my way towards her, feeling almost like a rock star basking in applause. "Ah, Karen, oh Karen, might I remind you that art is subjective? Just as this rusty mailbox symbolizes our existential freedom," I gestured grandly at the explosion of unapologetic colors decorating our once somber community. As if on cue, a younger neighbor stepped up, paintbrush in hand, and declared with pure enthusiasm, "We refer to these as public expressions of mailbox angst." The crowd burst into laughter, and even I had to stifle a chuckle. Who knew mailbox angst would be the rallying cry that sent Karen into overdrive? Where once her sneering authority struck fear, now it morphed into nothing more than comic fodder for our engagement of bright rebellion against the bureaucratic grayness she represented. But the highlight of this chaotic art extravaganza came when someone splashed an outrageous electric blue across one of the stark white walls of the mail center. The audacity of such a bold move sent Karen into a frenzy of epic proportions. "Who did this? You dare trespass against HOA property," she cried, her hands to her temples like she was mourning the loss of her beloved community, devoid of personality, that is. The laughter from the residents only egged her on, and it felt like a scene from a comedy about suburban life gone riotously rogue. "That would be the fine art of free expression, Karen. How about looking at it as a financial investment in the community's artistic future?" I couldn't help but add, fueling her frustrations like tossing gasoline on an open flame. As the group cackled and recorded bits of her outraged monologue for our neighborhood social media page, Karen's expression shifted from horror to mortification. "You'll pay for this," she threatened, but honestly, it just sounded more like flat-out denial of her own spiraling authority. Not before we have tea and donuts to celebrate an art worthy of preservation. Care to join, or shall I go ahead and reserve your seat at the Postal Art Hall of Fame? The possibility hung in the air like delicate confetti. As glorious hilarity coursed through us, I felt a flicker of warmth in my heart. There was power in telling her no, in choosing laughter, and in wielding creativity as our shield against her systematic drudgery. But just as the laughter reached a crescendo, a glint of hope shimmered in Karen's rigid demeanor. Perhaps she did see the futility of her antiquated confines. Perhaps there was a wisp of curiosity lurking beneath that tailored exterior. I suppose, she stammered, her voice catching on what could very well be a moment of weakness. I could taste a donut or two, provided you all agree to repaint that wall back to its original color afterward. Shockwaves of silence ensued, and I quickly realized, did Karen just make a subtle suggestion for compromise? The rest of the crowd seemed just as perplexed, looking from her to me. Maybe the sheer absurdity and joy had softened her heart, or maybe I was simply hallucinating from all the paint fumes. Would Karen really join the Rusty Mailbox Society? With a firm nod, I turned to face the crowd again, my paint-spattered shirt a badge of honor in this whimsical endeavor. All right, let's not squander this golden opportunity. Donuts for all. But first, I raised my paintbrush dramatically. Let's embrace this blending of colors together. And just like that, the Rusty Mailbox Society embraced a second act of creativity. The community had transformed before our eyes, not just the mailboxes, but the very essence of what it meant to be united against an underlying authoritarian wave. All I could think was, what a wild ride. Who would have thought art could be the thread weaving us all into a chaotic masterpiece? Would we actually find common ground in a world so divided by mailbox rust and HOA woes? The sun hadn't even fully graced the day when my heart sank into my gut, the ominous knock echoing through my house like a herald of doom. I yanked myself from the depths of my dreams. Dreams which had, in a cruel twist of irony, featured a serene existence, devoid of HOA absurdities. But there I stood, in my disheveled morning state, grappling with the reality of a rusted mailbox being judged like a defendant in an HOA tribunal. I mean, really? A mailbox? It was the flimsiest defense against the titanic powers of Karen Wentworth and her league of entitled enforcers. Worn out from sleepless nights spent battling my DIY desires versus the godforsaken rules, I felt the overwhelming urge to flip them the bird. But instead, I extended my hand for the papers she waved as if she were an auctioneer selling off my very soul. As I peered at the article detailing my transgression, I struggled to crate my neurons around the insignificance of it all. Sure, the oxidized speckling on my mailbox resembled a bad case of overzealous mold on a loaf of bread, but it wasn't as if it was endangering lives, unless you counted the demise of taste in neighborhood aesthetics. Hell, trimming my bushes felt like I was peeling back some midlife crisis summer crushes. My mind raced back through the arsenal of fines and grievances the HOA relentlessly hurled my way. A new fence that was too tall? A weed in the garden that was too vibrant? I was beginning to wonder if I was living in a neighborhood or some cosmic comedy show, where the punchline was delivered by the very woman whose ego could outshine the most gaudy lawn ornaments. In that moment of sheer satirical observance, I glanced at my neighbor and partner in rebellion, Liam Chen. He stood nearby, casually sipping from his comically oversized coffee cup, hidden beneath a cloud of carefree indifference. Did he know I was about to spiral into full-blown rebellion? His tattoo of a phoenix seemed to mock me from across the lawn, as if saying, "Rise, Jordan, rise out of the ashes of HOA madness." And just then, inspiration struck harder than that rusty mailbox had pulled me into an existential crisis. What if, I thought, we could turn the tables? I decided then and there, as the winds of absurdity wrapped around my wavy brown hair, that I'd take this injustice and not only contest it but elevate it to a cosmic level, a nonprofit cult, if you will. As I laid out my grand plans for revolution, I couldn't help but giggle at the thought of transforming our petty HOA into a nonprofit cult, complete with a mission statement that would make Karen's perfectly coiffed head spin. Picture it. The Mailbox Revival Society, a claim to absolve the residents from the absurdities of HOA demands while claiming our right to rust in peace. Liam jumped at the idea, his gleeful chuckle breaking from his mouth like fireworks on the 4th of July. Do we need a secret handshake too? Maybe a dress code so we all wear ironic t-shirts? Inspiration was flooding in, and suddenly, the thought of writing our own bylaws made me giddy with mischief. What if we mandated meetings where complaints could only be lodged if presented with interpretive dance? As we set the wheels in motion, the seduction of rebellion fueled my creativity. We printed flyers, adorned with vibrant designs that Liam whipped up in his signature laid-back style, promising neighbors a sanctuary from Karen's iron grip. Rumors began to spread, neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, and collective gasps echoed from the growing crowd of rust-inflicted souls. I reveled in their wide eyes as I gave my best dramatic rendition of a door-to-door evangelist peddling salvation through mailbox rust. Each passerby nodded along, perhaps dreaming of their own petty HOA grievances or wishing to unleash a flare of defiance against the looming specter of Karen's rules. Together, we would gather in my living room, our makeshift temple where coffee and sarcasm flowed freely. Oh, what a sight it was! The energy shifted from exasperation to excitement, and I could almost hear the distant melody of revolution playing. Karen wouldn't know what hit her. With every whispered scheme and half-baked plot, the prospect of confronting our HOA overlords infused us with a ridiculous sense of purpose. Were we on the verge of starting a grassroots movement filled with laughter and camaraderie? Maybe we'd even throw a parade featuring rusty mailboxes, glimmering in the sun like trophies of our newfound freedom. Wouldn't that infuriate her? After months of rising tensions, I could hardly contain my enthusiasm as I plotted the final act against our cult, like HOA. We'd grown so bold, ready to challenge every draconian fee they slapped on us, with the conviction of those fighting for justice. As thrilling and insane as it all seemed, my heart raced with exhilaration at the thought of raising our voices, a cacophony of laughter against Karen's cold, commanding presence. Was it too ambitious to think that we could change the HOA once and for all, or at least turn our furious grievances into a glorious celebration of backyard rebellion? The answer flared like the morning sun creeping into my dingy living room. No, it was just the beginning of something grand, absurd, and delightfully chaotic. With newfound resolve bubbling over the top like a shaken soda, I could hardly sleep that night. The excitement of transforming our little corner of suburban hell into a whimsical bastion of mailbox rebellion was almost too much to bear. I spent the night hours in a caffeine-fueled whirlwind, crafting a manifesto that would rival the Declaration of Independence, just with more curse words and illustrations of rusty mailboxes. Each clause was more outrageous than the last, insisting that residents were entitled to their rusty aesthetic and outlining how one's mailbox spoke volumes about their courageous defiance against conformity. I imagined Karen's face when she read it, stern brow furrowing as if tackling advanced calculus in a foreign language. No longer just the Mailbox Revival Society, we had officially become the Order of the Rusty Aesthetic, and if that didn't send shivers down Karen's spine, I didn't know what would. Churning with anticipation, I called an emergency meeting at my makeshift temple. The locals, equally burdened by the HOA's suffocating rules, poured into my living room like a ragtag army of confused rebels. Liam was already there, dressed in a hand-painted, rust is the new chic t-shirt, and prepared to assume the role of the hype man. "Welcome, fellow citizens," I declared with a flourish, a cheeseball grin plastered across my face. "Tonight, we embark on a journey beyond the mundane. We shall embrace our rust and reclaim our identity. Why conform to Karen's tyranny when we can bask in the glorious chaos of our existence?" My words flowed through the room like a rippling wave of enthusiasm, igniting the flags of rebellion in everyone's hearts. As the crowd began brainstorming, the ideas took on an absurd life of their own, swirling together in a humorous fusion of sheer insanity. Someone shouted that we needed a slogan for our movement, and without missing a beat, Liam threw out, "We're not rusty, we're vintage." Laughter echoed through the space, fueled by the collective relief that we were all in on this ridiculous escapade together. Our plans quickly escalated into a full-blown festival. Picture it, Rust Fest, a celebration with music, games, and the pièce de résistance, a competition for the most creatively rusted mailbox. I could already envision my neighbors, at last, coming together under a common purpose, uniting against our local tyrant, while donning outrageous outfits and sipping homemade lemonade, spiked with just enough sass to match our collective spirit. In the weeks that followed, our little rebellion transformed into a community movement. We adorned our mailboxes with glitter, flowers, and even tiny gnomes bearing rusty tools. Every time Karen or one of her minions drove by, they would do a double take, their expressions betraying the pure bewilderment of navigating a space that had become a veritable playground for defiance. I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory with every glance they hurled our way. I mean, come on! Here we were, scribbling our disdain in spray paint and organizing a festival in tribute to Oxides, while she remained a stoic, rule-enforcing robot. Who knew that a little rust could be the beacon of unity among neighbors, once too preoccupied with maintaining appearances? The grand day of Rustfest dawned bright and glorious. A cheerful cacophony of laughter spilled from the yards, and music danced through the air like a harmony meant to taunt the HOA. We'd set up brightly colored booths, each powered by the inventive minds of the community citizen. From rusty painting workshops to DIY mailbox makeover stations, there was something for everyone. My heart soared as I welcomed neighbors who I'd once seen only through the manicured shrubbery of our carefully controlled suburbia. The Rust Parade, featuring a float composed entirely of mailbox parts, wove its way through the streets, sending Karen's carefully curated world into delightful disarray. Just when I thought the day couldn't get any more ludicrous, none other than Karen herself stormed into our midst, armed with a clipboard, her expression stormy and set to dismay. She was here to restore order. Or so she'd probably convinced herself. I leaned in closer to Liam, whispering conspiratorially, "If she tries to shut us down, I might explode." But instead of launching into a bizarre rant about our bylaws and the penalties of mailbox neglect, something stunning happened. Folks, she froze as she witnessed our collective revelry. Neighbors dancing, laughing, adorned in silly hats that read, "Rust is the new black." Membership in the great Rusty aesthetic surged through the air, and for the first time I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her steely blue eyes. Was this really what she had fought against? Was order really worth sacrificing community? As if sensing the pendulum swinging away from her rule, Karen cleared her throat, drawing attention to her presence. The pure ludicrousness of this moment was almost unbearable. I mean, how could she possibly assert her dominance now? The crowd went quiet, the tension thick enough to cut. This isn't acceptable," Karen stuttered, gripping her clipboard tighter. But instead of the expected chorus of compliance, spontaneous laughter erupted. "Embrace the rust, Karen," someone shouted, and suddenly, it felt as if an electric current surged through the crowd. Karen's face twisted in disbelief, the absolute horror that not just a group of residents but an entire movement was now standing against her. Would she realize that the fight wasn't just over a mailbox anymore? Or, better yet, was she about to be confronted by an army of rusty aesthetic warriors ready to dethrone her from her self-appointed throne? The day was turning into something I had only dared to imagine. The silence thickened, a palpable tension, palpable enough to slice through with a rusty toolbox. I could see the gears grinding in Karen's mind. Was she ready to relinquish her reign of terror? Or would she double down, fighting back with whatever HOA she had left in her arsenal? For a moment, time felt suspended, the world outside our cozy suburban bubble apparently forgotten. It was just me, my neighbors, and a very bewildered Karen, surrounded by the unmistakable aroma of grilled burgers and the sound of "Rust is the new black" blaring from a sound system that until last week had probably been confined to someone's basement. "What the hell have we unleashed?" I muttered to Liam, incredulity dancing on the edge of my panicking thoughts. Then, with what I'm convinced was an Olympic-level eye roll, Karen seized the moment, or maybe she was just trying to look composed while already teetering on the edge of disbelief. "If your goal is to cause trouble, then," she began, her voice quivering as everyone leaned in, hungry for the drama. I, on the other hand, could only silently applaud her excellent commitment to the theatrics she was seemingly unaware of participating in. Just seconds into this unlikely standoff, my mind raced with a brilliant yet ludicrous idea. I stepped forward, confidence coursing through me like an unexpectedly strong cup of coffee. Trouble? Oh no, Madam Sentinel. This is a celebration of individuality, a testament to the unshackling of our creative spirits. We are merely living out lives of rustic expression. My words dripped with exaggerated zeal as I reveled in the very absurdity of it. The crowd erupted with a mix of applause and support, a veritable sea of glitter and gnomes brandishing tokens of defiance. What more could anyone from the HOA even say? Had we not turned the very act of mailbox struggle into an artistic expression? Karen's lips pursed tighter, her clipboard becoming a flimsy lifeline amid the roaring laughter that reverberated off the cul-de-sac walls. It was almost painful to watch. Like a deer caught in headlights, she desperately looked for a weaponization of rules, policies, or bylaws to bring down the proverbial hammer on us. But as she floundered under the weight of our joy, I couldn't help but wonder if even she recognized how ridiculous the situation had become. "Listen," Karen began, and you could hear the authority in her voice crumble like an overcooked cookie. "You people, you really think this? She waved her clipboard around, as if trying to physically slap the joy away. "This mess is going to fly in my backyard? The very phrase made me chuckle. Indeed, this scene was flying, like a paper airplane on a windy day, soaring beyond the limits of her carefully crafted rules. "It's your backyard," I shot back. "But as we've decided, it's also our playground. If we can't embrace the rust in our lives, then what are we really doing, huh?" I called out, feeling my momentum surge like the tide, buoyed along by waves of collective enthusiasm. As I continued my passionate monologue, our neighbors were nodding along, voices brushing against each other in a rallying chorus. "Rust is freedom. Rust is art. Down with conformity," someone called out, creating a chain reaction that took root from the very fabric of our collective discontent. I glanced back at Karen. Her face became a palette of confusion, fury, and perhaps even a hint of regret. The reality that her tyrannical grip might be slipping was ludicrous musing. Had she ever imagined that she would become the villain in this suburban epic? A beautifully disheveled spectacle of rebellion against her aim of clean sidewalks and unwarranted fines? Yet in that moment of overwhelming bliss born from the chaos we'd created, it became clear that we were more than just rebels hiding behind rusty mailboxes. We were a community, albeit a star-spangled, rust-ridden one, and we were banding together to assert our right to joy. Before Karen could muster a coherent thought, a raucous, jubilant chant began to swell from the crowd. "Rust is trust. Rust is must. Rust is our proud thrust." It was surreal. The kind of moment your brain tries to file away for future comedic gold, but also knows full well can only happen in your wildest anecdotes. I could feel the rush of life around me, each human emotion and sarcastic remark mingling in a beautiful concoction of belonging. And then, in an absurd twist of fate, Karen dropped her clipboard, the very symbol of her authority, which now lay crumpled like the hopes of everyone who put faith in her stringent rule. Time froze again, and this time it wasn't for dramatic effect. The anticipation rippled through the crowd, electricity sparking around us as we stood on the precipice of complete and utter societal upheaval. What was she going to do now? What was anyone going to do now? As we collectively held our breaths, waiting for a response from the unyielding queen of the HOA, I figured that however this turned out, we'd all get some splendid entertainment out of it. Would she embrace the rust like the unexpected mother of rebellion she never intended to be? I swear, never in my wildest dreams could I have foreseen the epic transformation of our sleepy suburban cul-de-sac into a battleground of artistic expression and rebellion against HOA tyranny. As the chant of "Rust is trust, rust is must, rust is our proud thrust" reverberated through the air, it tingled through my bones like a long-awaited pep rally. Just moments prior, we had been mere victims of Karen's iron grip on our subpar postal aesthetics. Now, we were on the precipice of thrilling chaos, daring her to lay down the law and defend her crumbling empire made of excessive bylaws and pent-up oppression. I could almost envision headlines rolling in. "Suburb transforms into epicenter of rusty mailbox revolt. Residents wise up." My heart raced at the sheer ludicrousness of it all. Who knew mailbox rust could usher in an age of enlightenment, or whatever colorful nonsense we were concocting? Then, the phoenix of an idea arose in my mind, defeating Karen Wentworth with her own language. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a moment to appreciate the rusty glory right before us," I bellowed, raising my arms theatrically as if they were extensions of the mailbox in question. For too long we've acquiesced to the suffocating demands of dull, uninspired aesthetics. Why should we live in a cardboard box of conformity? Rust is just the passage of time, isn't it? It tells a story, a chronicle of the beautiful imperfections inherent in suburban life. As I turned, I couldn't even help but profoundly admire the deconstructed nature of my rhetoric. Because honestly, half of these homes could use a little rust to spiff up the cookie-cutter vibe, riddled with high expectations and stark white fences that were practically institutions of mediocrity. To my delight, the crowd was on board. There was a palpable energy, an electric current of rebellion flashing through every rust-bellied homeowner. "Down with conformity, up with creativity," echoed owing to a theatrical twist that turned me into the eccentric jester of this misfit kingdom. I quickly spotted Liam in the midst of the crowd, waving a makeshift flag he had fashioned out of a tattered flannel shirt adorned with pink flamingos, a symbol of our newfound freedom. Could Karen be vanquished by the power of abstract rebellion? The thought tickled my fancy as I turned back to the tightly wound woman who had just dropped her clipboard. Quite possibly the best moment of my life. Of course, the brief flicker of astonishment in her blue eyes gave me a certain satisfaction. Oh, I was definitely ride or die for this ensemble cast of chaos. "You can't stifle our creativity with rules," I declared, as Liam bounced up and down like a caffeinated puppy. Karen, however, wasn't backing down without a fight. The whipped cream of her entitled fury soon dripped all over our cheerfest. This spectacle is unhinged," she blurted, arm swinging like a pendulum of doom, pointing towards our rainbow of raucous laughter and laughter. "You'll all regret this insubordination. It's against the bylaws. Your mailboxes. Oh, those antiquated rules." I shot back, genuinely baffled that we hadn't already disposed of them in last month's trash pickup. Actually, I'd argue our rusty decadence is an artistic counterpoint to your austere HOA manifesto. Consider this, a performance piece. Was I losing my mind? Yes, quite happily though. I could hear laughter echoing in harmony with the spirit of absurdity just waiting to burst free from the faded, monotonous frames that had tried to cage us. In my mind, laughter felt like a rope, a catalyst ready to snap, coupled with uncertainty of where it might lead, but loving the uncontrolled route regardless. Amidst the chaos, Liam took the initiative and changed the combat zone entirely by strapping together a hose full of colorful spray paint. "Let's make an art installation, Jordan. We can get the whole neighborhood involved. This will be the modern revolution," he hollered amid our creative protest. Imagine the sheer lunacy of it. Before I knew it, we were engaged in a risque neighborhood art challenge, inviting every disgruntled resident to join the riot against Karen's oppressive bylaws, bringing an astounding array of colors, swirls, and marvelously improvised designs to our mailboxes. Who knew Karen's ultimate weapon could become our greatest masterpiece? Karen was, without a doubt, flailing against this whirlwind of joy and creativity that we had unleashed. With each swoosh of color, I caught a glimpse of the chaotic turmoil swirling inside her. Her tightly coiled posture spoke volumes of unpredictable fury masked behind her impeccably styled bob. "This is vandalism," she finally shouted, red-faced and nearly shrieking as I experimentally splashed neon paint across my mailbox while cheering crowds erupted in more chants. "This will bring heavy fines. The city will disown you." Oh, my dear Ms. Wentworth, if there was anything I'd lovingly learned about you up to this point, it was that your words had no paint or power in the colors of our rebellion. As I stepped back to admire our collective masterpiece, a delightful delight of lunacy and brilliant rust, an idea struck me like a bolt of lightning. If I was going to wade through this colorful, chaotic war of suburban absurdity, I might as well photograph it, document our euphoria. Perhaps I could turn it into an eclectic coffee table book. Rust, revolution, and a detached HOA dictator. How delicious would that be? I could feel the excitement bubbling in my chest because, regardless of whatever Karen had stitched in her rulebook tapestry, this revolution had already begun to unfold in brilliant hues and laughter, the cosmos of our liberation. Would we seize the delight in this creativity? Would the universe acknowledge us, the Rust Rebels, in all our whimsical glory? The moment was ours for the taking. Thanks for sticking around with me through the chaos to the end. Want more high-stakes HOA drama? Check out our recent HOA clash with the video on the right, or let YouTube pick your next wild ride with the video on the left. Whichever way you go, buckle up. There's plenty more HOA insanity on the way. Tune in again for more HOA chaos.